The latest round of clashes between Azerbaijan and Armenia and the Russian-initiated truce that came afterwards put Iran in a very difficult and complicated situation. Since the beginning of the war, actually, Iranian political elite and the public were kind of polarized on how Tehran should react to the developments. On the one hand, there was a group of people arguing that because of religious and cultural considerations, Iran should take side with Azerbaijan. The pressure posed by Iran's ethnic Azeris in the form of public gatherings in support for Baku was also, a strong factor in pushing the Iranian government further into that direction. The second group argued that Baku retaking Karabakh would deal a serious blow to Iran in geopolitical terms, and it would also mean an increasing Turkish and Israeli presence in the South Caucasus, which is, in the narrative of this group, considered as Iran's cultural and historical strategic depth. Reports of Turkey deploying Syrian mercenaries into Karabakh was another major concern for Iran. Despite being aware of all these perils, the Iranian government opted for publicly supporting Azerbaijan, apparently because ideological factors and Azeri pressure were kind of more effective. At the same time, there was a strong belief in Iran that the recent war in Karabakh was in fact Erdogan's initiative, not Aliyev's, and that Baku would never start the war without being totally confident of Ankara's full support. Therefore, it could be said that Tehran's stance toward the recent Karabakh war was more reactive in nature, and its support for Baku was more about accepting the new realities on the ground than being comfortable with what was going on actually. After the war, Iran started trying to turn the new challenges in its northern neighborhood to opportunities by proposing to participate in the post-war reconstruction of the recently retaken territories in the area. Iranian officials also welcomed Turkish initiative of so-called 3+3, namely a regional framework consisting of Turkey, Russia, Iran, and the three South Caucasian countries. But again, I think this was a reactive move, and Iran does not seem to have, any specific initiative of its own for the region. However, the very fact that Iran has opted for neutralizing threats via cooperation with other stakeholders rather than confronting them shows that Iran's policy in the South Caucasus is driven by different factors than its strategy and approach in the Middle East, for example. As for the impact of the recent Karabakh war on Iran-Turkey relations, as we've already witnessed, there have been two phases in Iran-Turkey relations during and after the Karabakh war. Shortly after the end of the war, tensions occurred between the two countries when President Erdogan recited a poem at a victory parade in Baku. Apparently, the poem was, referring to the idea of so-called unified Azerbaijan, and that was enough for, Iranian officials to blame Erdogan of igniting separatist and so-called pan-Turkist sentiments in Iran. However, there is a deeper context, I think, which is related to Turkey's growing influence in the South Caucasus in the aftermath of the Karabakh War. Iranian government and a great part of the public opinion alike believe that this influence, actually the Turkish influence, comes at the cost of Iran's interests. Some also accuse the government, the Iranian government, of sitting idly by during the crisis and letting Turkey expand its zone of influence in what they perceive, as I said, as Iran's cultural and historical zone of influence. But in the second phase, as I mentioned earlier, The Iranian government tried to adapt itself actually to the new status quo in the South Caucasus by welcoming Turkey's initiative for regional cooperation. Given the depth of Tehran-Ankara ties and the fact that there is actually little Tehran could do to reverse the situation, especially when Russia, also supports the post-Karabakh War regional order, I expect cooperation to prevail Iran-Turkey interactions in the region. As for the Israeli factor, the Islamic Republic leaders analyze the relations between Azerbaijan and Israel beyond the bilateral context and actually consider it part of a comprehensive plot by Israel for strategic encirclement, as they say, strategic encirclement of Iran. Of course, the relations between Israel and Azerbaijan, are nothing new, and for many years, the two countries have had close ties in various political, economic, and even military spheres. However, over the past several years, Tehran has witnessed, Israeli influence gradually but steadily expanding in Iran's neighboring regions. About a decade ago, for example, Israel finally succeeded in convincing Iran's other northern neighbor, namely Turkmenistan, to accept its ambassador. Israel's mostly covert activities in the Iraqi Kurdistan region have also caused serious concerns in Iran. On the other hand, shortly before the outbreak of the Nagorno-Karabakh war, the so-called Abraham Accords gave Israel the opportunity to formally expand its influence into Iran's southern Arab neighbors. Therefore, Azerbaijan is just one piece of a puzzle that shows Iran's concerns about Israel's regional activities and regional influence. In the same vein, the growing expansion of military ties between Baku and Tel Aviv, which took place in the form of Israeli support for Azerbaijan in the recent war, is a matter of concern for Iran. From Iran's point of view, this could lead to actually Israel's intelligence and operational dominance in Azerbaijan, which could be used against Tehran if and when necessary.